disappeared on his way home. A witness saw him arguing with a stranger. That stranger went to prison, and the case was closed. But disappearances don't always end that cleanly. In 1984, I worked missing persons in Ohio. Most cases faded out quietly. This one didn't, because it gave us exactly what detectives want: a witness, a timeline, and someone to blame. The missing man was Daniel Mercer, 34, an insurance adjuster. A routine life. On October 17th, he left work just after 6. He called home, said he was on his way. At home, his wife Melanie was waiting, and their 11-year-old son Ethan. Daniel never reached the house. His car vanished with him. 2 days later, we got a call from a gas station off Highway Exit 47. The clerk remembered Daniel clearly because Daniel wasn't alone. He was arguing. The other man was described as aggressive, older, unshaven, driving a dark sedan. They argued for several minutes near the pumps, voices raised, hands moving. Then both cars pulled away. Only one ever disappeared. We didn't have a body. We didn't have a vehicle. But we had conflict. Back then, that was enough. Within a week, we found the man who matched the gas station description. His name was Richard Gale. He had a record. He had a temper. And he had no alibi for that night. From that moment on, the case stopped being about a missing man. It became about proving we'd already found the right answer. And that's where we made our first mistake. Every missing person case has a public life, and sometimes a private one. We didn't know about the second life at first. We weren't supposed to. 4 days after Daniel Mercer disappeared, someone called his office. She didn't ask for the police. She didn't ask what had happened. She asked to speak to Daniel. And when she was told he was missing, she hung up. One of Daniel's co-workers took the call. He suspected who it was, because he knew about her. Not because she worked there, but because Daniel had mentioned her before. Not by name, not proudly, just enough to know she existed. The co-worker came forward on his own. He told us Daniel was seeing someone, casually, quietly. It didn't sound like a secret meant to last. It sounded like a mistake. Affairs don't always make people disappear, but violence almost always does. At least that's what we believed. The suspect was already in custody. The timeline still worked. The witness hadn't changed his statement. One of the officers spoke to the woman who had called. Her name was Annabelle Howard, 26 years old, a waitress at a roadside cafe. She said she hadn't spoken to Daniel that day. She had an alibi. She was at work. People could confirm it. So the affair became background, not cause. Still, protocol required one thing. I spoke to Daniel's wife. I told her there had been a call to his office from a woman, someone Daniel knew. She cried, quietly at first, then harder. Nothing about it felt wrong enough to stop the process. But for a moment, just a moment, it felt rehearsed. Then the feeling passed. Grief is strange. People perform it differently. I didn't write the feeling down. I didn't flag it. Because cases don't turn on feelings. They turn on evidence. The case was being prepared for trial. The affair was mentioned once, briefly, without emphasis. The argument at the gas station carried more weight. So did the prior convictions. So did the lack of an alibi. Richard Gale remained in custody as the case moved forward. And with that, the story seemed to reach its ending. A missing man, a suspect, a family left behind. Everything appeared to be in its place, and that's when the quiet settled in. An alibi doesn't have to break to become dangerous. Sometimes it only needs to bend. We didn't revisit Annabelle Howard's alibi because of suspicion. We did it because timelines were being finalized for court. Every gap had to be accounted for, even the ones that didn't seem to matter. Annabelle Howard's alibi was solid, until it wasn't. During her shift that evening, there was a 40-minute gap. She told her supervisor she was taking a break, said she went to the staff room to eat. Several co-workers remembered seeing her walk toward the back. Later, someone recalled seeing her again, roughly half an hour later. No one was certain exactly when. The timing wasn't exact, but it was close. Close to when Daniel Mercer disappeared. Not proof, but enough to reopen a door we'd already shut. We brought Annabelle in again. This time she didn't sound defensive. She sounded tired, like someone who had been holding a story together for too long. She told us how she met Daniel. He came into the cafe once, then again, then regularly. At first it was nothing, then it wasn't. She said Daniel talked about leaving his family. Not dramatically, not urgently. Like a man rehearsing the future he wasn't sure he deserved. Then she told us something else. She was pregnant. She explained the gap that night that way. Said she felt sick. Said she spent part of her break in the restroom. No one could confirm that. No one could deny it either. And then she mentioned a phone call. Weeks before the disappearance, Daniel's wife had called her. She asked her to stay away from the family, to stop seeing him, to leave them alone. That raised a question we couldn't answer. How did she know? Because when I had previously spoken about the affair with Daniel's wife, she said she didn't know about anyone else. She cried. She sounded shocked. So either she was telling the truth then, or someone was lying now. But 2 days after that, the case was already over. Richard Gale was in prison. The trial had concluded. He looked unwell in court and quietly acknowledged his guilt. The file was closed. No new interrogations were ordered. The timeline was never reviewed again. So the questions stayed where they were. In the file, in the margins, unanswered. Cases don't reopen because of answers. They reopened because of sentences no one noticed the first time. 5 years later, Richard Gale died in prison. Heart failure. No appeal pending. No confession to retract. Just a closed case, officially closed again. When an inmate dies, files get reviewed. Not to find truth, to make sure procedure was followed. That's how the Mercer file came back to my desk. Old paper, faded ink, notes written by people who thought they were done. I wasn't looking for anything new. I was checking boxes. Then I saw a line I didn't remember writing. A child interview. Supplemental notes. One sentence circled in pencil. I was asleep when Dad came home, but I heard them arguing later. That was it. No follow-up questions. No flags. No timeline change. He was 11. Children mix dreams with reality. They confuse nights. They repeat things they overhear. That's what we believed. But if the sentence was true, then Daniel Mercer wasn't taken from the highway. He made it home. And everything we built the case on stood in the wrong place. We had searched the house. No blood, no signs of struggle, nothing out of place, because he lived there. His things were supposed to be there. By the time I read the sentence again, the house was gone. The family had moved. The neighbors had changed. The night no longer existed. The file didn't tell me what happened. It only told me where we should have been looking. Once the sentence was back in front of me, I couldn't put the file away again. Not without trying one last thing. The case was closed. Richard Gale was dead. The house no longer existed. And Melanie Mercer had died in 1988 from cancer. But one witness was still alive, and he was no longer a child. It took time to find him. A different city, a different last name. After his mother's death, Ethan lived with his aunt, Teresa Herm. We met in a public place. No recorder, no badge. Teresa allowed us to speak alone. I didn't ask him about his father. I asked what he remembered about the house. He said his parents argued a lot back then. Not every night, but often. Raised voices weren't unusual. That's why no one checked on him. Ethan said he didn't remember Daniel calling after work, and that he didn't see his father that night. He said he only heard voices later, when it was already night, after he had gone to sleep. Then he added something else. That night felt different. The argument ended too suddenly. Daniel said something loudly, and then stopped. After that, the voices went quiet. He said his mother came into his room afterward, told him to go back to sleep, said everything was fine. Her voice was calm. It didn't prove anything. Parents comfort children all the time, and Ethan was careful with his words. He said he wasn't certain, that arguments were common, that sometimes he heard them, and sometimes he dreamed them. But combined with what happened afterward, it changed how the night could be read. There was nothing I could do with that. No crime scene, no timeline, no jurisdiction, just a memory. For years, we thought Daniel Mercer disappeared somewhere between work and home. But if the boy was right, the last place his father was seen alive was inside his own house. Some cases end in court. Some end in confession. And some never end at all. Daniel Mercer's file went back into storage. Same folder, same label, different weight. Not because we learned the truth, but because we learned where it could have been. You can't reopen a house that no longer exists. You can't question people who are gone. You can't test memories that waited too long. There's only one thing I'm certain of now. Daniel Mercer didn't disappear alone. Whatever happened that night happened between people who knew each other, people who shared walls, a child, a life. Some people vanished. Their stories didn't.